and welcome back to this retrospective series on the Primarchs and their legions. I am the Darklight Emissary, and I will guide you through a brief introduction to these legions and what you can expect from them if you're new, and some speculation if you're not so new to this setting. This episode is on the 9th Legion, the Blood Angels Legion, and their Primarch, the Angel Sanguinius. So to start off with this legion, I'm going to go back to them before they had Sanguinius as their Primarch. This legion was considered, and it still is, but was considered even more so, one of the most vicious legions that could come upon you if you were resisting against the Great Crusade. They would give 0 quarter, and they were an extremely vicious force. Now, when Sanguinius was found and given command of his legion, he tempered that fury, but if you know anything about Sanguinius, he is one of the best fighters amongst the Primarchs. I don't think any of the Primarchs would say that Sanguinius would be able to say that they were better than Sanguinius in single combat against their brother. He was also one of the most popular Primarchs. He was in the running for War Master, and probably many of his brothers wished he would have been made War Master. Now, Sanguinius, one of his traits as a Primarch was actually quite a bit of humility. He knew he was a pretty powerful Primarch and was well thought of by his brothers, but he was harboring a dark secret, which was his legion had a bit of a curse on it, in the terms of they had a condition called the Red Thirst, and this made his legion, some of his legionaries, basically go insane with viciousness that could not be stopped. And Sanguinius was trying to figure out a way to stop that, because he expressed to one of his brother Primarchs that he was fearing that the Emperor would expunge his legion like the 2 missing legions were expunged. He makes reference to them and what happened to them, which is why Sanguinius did not bring up the Red Thirst to his father. He was a bit afraid of his father, like a lot of the Primarchs were. But Sanguinius was also one of the most loyal Primarchs to the Emperor. And ultimately, Sanguinius gave his life for the Emperor, and that is something that's coming up soon in the Siege of Terra books. We get to finally see that happen. It's been in the setting forever. It'll be in some of the artwork of this video, him dead at Horus's feet. And one of the most significant things about that event is that Sanguinius foresaw it with a gift of foresight he had, which was a much less cursed version than Conrad Kurtz's visions. So Sanguinius saw his death at Horus's hands, but this also kind of gave Sanguinius a bit of an advantage during the Siege of Terra, in that he was unafraid to go out into the worst conflicts, because he basically knew he had plot armor until he confronted his brother later in the Siege of Terra. So if you saw the Angel coming and you were a traitor, you are toast during the siege. He's already one of the toughest Primarchs, one of those accomplished martially Primarchs, but he wasn't going to die to anyone except Horus, and he knew it, and he used that to his advantage. I mean, Sanguinius has a Imperator Titan as one that he can claim as one of his kill counts. The guy is one of the most accomplished Primarchs, and pretty much all of his brothers, whether they're traitors or loyalists, all praised Sanguinius's nature and humor. Lorgar of the Wordbearers, who, when we get to talk about him, he's the one who kind of set off the whole heresy. He said that Sanguinius was the best of them, of all of them, and I basically agree with that assessment. Sanguinius had a lot of nobility to him, but he did not let that go to his head. He had a lot of humility to him as well. Now, his legion is considered one of the top legions, I'd say, along with their Primarch. Sanguinius led them well. and they were a vicious fighting force like any Space Marine Legion would have been, but I feel like the Blood Angels were a bit more so compared to some legions. One of their tactics was they would approach a world they were taking over, and they would give the world one chance to capitulate to them, and if they didn't, then they would, assault you with a blistering speed and aggression that was just like other legions would look at it and think that they were a bit insane witnessing it if they were a long campaign with them. So just trying to imagine that just kind of just puts in perspective the kind of legion they were in terms of when you rouse them effectively, they were a force that could not be stopped. They were a tide of red ceramite and blades and bolters and things like that. One of the interesting things about this legion is they were at the top of the list for Chaos to try to corrupt them. They tried mightily during the Great Crusade and Horus Heresy to corrupt the Blood Angels. Khorne and Slaanesh, two of the Chaos Gods, were the two that mostly vied for Sanguinius. I'm not sure why it was. I don't know. No, I'm not sure why Slaanesh specifically wanted Sanguinius, but it makes perfect sense that the Blood God of War, Khorne, would want the Blood Angels. They are kind of a shoo-in for that honor, and interestingly enough, Khorne kind of took Angron and the World Eaters as almost a consolation to Sanguinius. He would have much preferred them. Also Horus and Lorgar really wanted Sanguinius on their side as well. If they could have Sanguinius and his legion on the traitor side, things would have ended much differently, I think, because Sanguinius and his legion end up being some of the prime defenders of the Emperor's Palace and Terra during the final battles. Without them, no one was going to replace them. If they weren't there, maybe Lemon Rose would have stayed with the Space Wolves, because they did go there for a short time after destroying Prospero, but they didn't stay. And part of that, I think, was because they're like, well, the Blood Angels are here, the White Scars are here, and the Imperial Fists are here. It's pretty secure here. We're going to go try to do some stuff. That didn't end up working out. But with Sanguinius, he eventually is confronted with Horus, and now there's some speculation here during the final bits of the Horus Heresy about what's going to actually happen. There's a bit of speculation in the community that Sanguinius is going to possibly succumb to the Red Thirst himself, and the Emperor is going to come to the throne room and find Horus killed at Sanguinius's hands, and that the Emperor is going to be injured mortally by Sanguinius, who he will have to put down, and that Imperial propaganda switches it around that Horus killed Sanguinius, and that the Emperor was mortally wounded by Horus before the Emperor finally takes down Horus. But that's speculation. The setting of the lore does not say that, but it would be interesting if they decide to go with that. Now, after Sanguinius' death, his legion undergoes a change. They end up with a curse amongst their psyches called the Black Rage, and they basically see visions of their Primarch's death. And the Blood Angels on Terra at the time that first experienced the Black Rage turned into whirlwinds of just horrifying terror to fight. They'd make World Eaters think twice about challenging them, which World Eaters are usually the equal to two Blood Angels in terms of close range, all or nothing combat. But with the Black Rage over them, the Blood Angels just tore through the traitors. That kind of helped kickstart the traitors' retreat. I'm sure you will see as they retreated after Horus's defeat. Now, the Blood Angels, of course, took part in the Scouring, probably to great effect to avenge the loss of their Primarch. And Amongst the Blood Angels, you've got some superlative warriors like Amit, who goes on to found one of the chapters called the Flesh Tearers. You've got Raldoron, who's the first captain, and Ascillion, I believe, who was the Primarch's bodyguard. All these soldiers were some of the best ones. Talking a little bit about the Night Lords, how I said they were kind of known for not fighting legionaries very well. One of the Night Lords tried to challenge Raldoron during the siege, and Raldoron's like, "I've never heard of you," and then he easily dumpstered the guy. It wasn't even close. Now, after the Scouring and for the next 10,000 years, the Blood Angels would be one of the most stalwart legions, and then eventually some of the most stalwart chapters of Space Marines. In the current 40k era, they are some of the most significant Marines, I'd say, one of the most significant chapters. They have some of the best warriors. Their leader is a man named Dante, who is the longest living single Space Marine that isn't in a dreadnought like Bjorn the Fell-Handed. He's been their leader for like over 1,000 years now. So Dante is considered old even by Space Marine standards, and he even feels a bit of that age, I believe. And they also have a very powerful librarian class. They've got Mephiston, who is arguably the most powerful psyker on the Loyalist side in the current 40k era. And he is a very powerful individual. And then, of course, you've got the Death Company, which is basically any of the Marines that are suffering from the Black Rage. You typically don't come back from the Black Rage. So you are put into these death companies, and you are sent out to hopefully, take some of the enemy with you, but ultimately, have a good death. But usually if you have the Black Rage, you do not come back from it. There's only one or two Blood Angels that have come from the other side of the Black Rage. And I believe Mephiston is one of them. And there might be one other one that I don't know off the top of my head. The Blood Angels are not one of the legions I know a lot, just off the top of my head. I read one of their books a long time ago during 40k era. And they have some interesting history, and they're one of the more storied legions. It's just not one of the ones I know off the top of my head super well. So I'm going to do my best not to ramble or cut this one short, but I'll talk about what I know about these legions. That's kind of the challenge of these retrospectives, is to see what I know if someone was to ask me and I'm not sitting there reading the wiki or something. So, of course, one of the most unique things about Sanguinius, if we go back a bit to the Primarch again, is that Sanguinius has wings. He has one of the most obvious mutations of any of the Primarchs, and it's not known for sure if that is a chaos tinged corruption of him. The Emperor definitely didn't give him wings. He didn't give any of the Primarchs obvious mutations like that. So, but we are never told what the Emperor thinks of his wings. Like, he's obviously given full command of his legion and allowed to continue on. And this is the Imperium where, this is the Empire where, they say, suffer not the mutant to live, basically, right? They don't believe in any imperfections of the human form. But, Sanguinius is kind of that exception. His form is considered glorious. During the siege especially, he is considered a iconic force of justice and good on the battlefield, morale for his beleaguered troops. Anywhere the Angel would go, the Loyalists would rally forth, and Sanguinius would reap a great toll amongst the enemy and inspire his men to do the same. One of the other interesting things about Sanguinius is that during the beginning part of the heresy, after they defeat the forces of chaos, So this kind of goes into that corruption I was saying, that desire by the forces of chaos I didn't really go into. It's in some of the artwork of this video. They were duped into going to a planet that was already chaos corrupted. There was Khornate demons primarily there, a bloodthirster of Khorne, which is a greater demon, and also a keeper of secrets of Slaanesh there. And they tried to corrupt Sanguinius. It didn't work out. Sanguinius lost the fight against the bloodthirster there, but the Legion still ended up coming out on top against the bloodthirster and the keeper of secrets, and they were able to recover their lord, who I think suffered a shattered spine from fighting the bloodthirster. I don't recall exactly why the bloodthirster didn't kill him. Probably because that he wanted to corrupt him still, but and maybe I'll try it at a later date. You know, Khorne did covet Sanguinius, and he covets the Blood Angels in 40k era too. So there was that desire there. And again, I guess Slaanesh's desires to try to corrupt everything, so that's why Slaanesh's forces were there. But that's a little more ambiguous to me. It would make sense that, you know, a legion that takes blood in its name and is known for its viciousness in combat would have a possible chance of being corrupted by a war god. You know, like in his aspect of war, Sanguinius goes from a glorious angel to a, you know, angel of death, right? He turns into a whirlwind of death and fighting in war, and exhorts any of his nearby forces to that same level of exertion. And you know, like for being a single superlative warrior, Sanguinius's greatest ability was to rally forces around him. You know, like if Sanguinius was a character in a, you know, like a real-time strategy game, he would have an aura that like boosts his troops' morale to an insane degree and makes them all fight, you know, way better. You know, gives them a buff to damage and things like that. And but that being said, they get off that planet and they end up actually at Robot Golem's kingdom, the 500 worlds of Ultramar, because there's a bunch of warp storms going on and they can't get directly to Terra. And it's speculated by Robot and Sanguinius, and eventually the Lion, that Terra might have already fallen to Horus. They had gained no word from there. Long story short, Robot Golem decides to, you know, announce a secondary Imperium because he's like, we gotta continue the traditions onward. We think the Emperor's dead. And they make Sanguinius the Emperor of this secondary Imperium called Imperium Secundus. And being who he is, Sanguinius was very humble and kind of like, I don't want to be the leader. You know, he was that sort of good leader that like, no, I don't want the responsibility. But both Robot and the Lion were like, yeah, but you're the best of us, you should take it. Sanguinius did, and if you look at the artwork of this video, he does not look thrilled to be named Emperor of this Secundus Imperium. But what's interesting is eventually Conrad Kurtz shows up, due to reasons we'll talk about in his stuff. And, you know, Sanguinius knows the gift of foresight is in Conrad. And Conrad's like, yeah, I'm going to be killed by the Emperor, and it's going to happen like thousands of years from now. And so Sanguinius is like, well, that means he has to survive. The Emperor has to survive, right? And so that's how they decide to send the Blood Angels back to Terra as fast as possible to try to protect the Emperor, because they realize the fight's not over and Horus hasn't reached it yet. So just an interesting tidbit about how the Legion ends up at the Siege of Terra as one of the 3 legions to protect it. They get some help from an unlikely source in Conrad. And then Sanguinius launches Conrad out into space in a stasis capsule. He stays for an indeterminate amount of time. Not sure exactly how long he was stuck out there, but... So this has been a bit about the Blood Angels and Sanguinius. I rambled a little bit more on this one. It was a little bit more disorganized. I apologize for that, but I'm not going to be perfect at this, especially in this early part of this. I mostly just want to give a brief snapshot, as usual, of these things. So please like and subscribe if you liked it. Please comment if you have any questions. I love to discuss these topics. And as always, bring your light into the dark places. and I will see you in the next one. We have the 10th Legion coming up next, and I hope you have a great day or night wherever you are. Thank you.